Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time zone you may find yourself in. My name is Peter Musnix, and I am here to discuss a matter that I think is important to me personally and deserves a little bit of exploration. And that is that the internet is as important as the printing press in the global spread of knowledge. Now, before we begin, I want to make absolutely clear my definition of the word knowledge, which I believe will meet most academic kind of interpretations of the word knowledge, and that is the facts, information, and skills acquired through experience and or education. So with that little bit of housekeeping out of the way, let's go back and take a quick review of the history of the printing press and the internet, just so that we're clear on the timelines. So when I make references to other historical events, we'll have a contextual framework from which to interpret those. Gutenberg's press, 1440, basically enabled the broad distribution of printed materials through movable type. The internet, discovered by no one, developed by the United States and a lot of other intellectuals, late 70s, basically a half a millennia apart from each other. And I think that is important to note on the timeline for this discussion. So as for the internet as being as important as the printed word, I believe I have two main points, two main beliefs that support that thesis. And the first one pertains to the decentralization of knowledge. Before the printed word, much of that was controlled by political, perhaps cultural, as well as religious elites. And the availability of that information, the interpretation, more importantly, of that information, was really left up to kind of political and monastic classes of the time. Most information at that time, given that European literacy rates at about the time of the invention of the printing press were about 30%, and today we're well beyond 90 on a global scale, which is, I believe, interesting information that helps support my thesis. The information was controlled by elites, able to be interpreted by a small, kind of what I'll call a minority of adults living in Europe in the 15th century. Afterwards, I think, and the impact of which on knowledge through education is tremendous, as governments and societies and individuals as well saw that as a way to serve the highest and greatest good of humanity and individually as well. Literacy rates rose slowly. Intellectual curiosity stemmed we went from the Middle Ages into the Renaissance, and clearly that is a major watershed in human history in terms of development of not only our political and cultural institutions, but for religious and others as well. Before the advent of the internet, or after the advent of the internet, we clearly had excellent access to the printed works of practically everybody, with the exception of a few titles that may have been suppressed by governments for political or other reasons. We had excellent access to those. After the advent of the internet, we had more universal access to those same materials. Before, we had an economic barrier. We had to purchase the book or have access to a library from which to borrow that particular piece of work. But today, and again, we're assuming that people have an internet connection and have the ability to read the material presented to them on the internet. We have access practically to all those same materials at a very economic rate. Even though we may have to pay for a copyrighted work, we may be able to procure a Kindle version of that for a fraction of the cost of the printed book. And we are able to consume that immediately instead of waiting for it to be shipped or having to go to the bookstore, etc. Second point is what I'll call the democratization of information as well. And by this I mean the real-time nature not only of the text provided to us on the internet, but as well as the photography and videography that we're able to consume there for the purposes of knowledge. And many times that comes down simply to information. Being able to see in real time protests, political protests across the world exert, and that enables individuals to make a choice. Perhaps they wish to participate in exerting pressure on political organizations, governmental, non-governmental, in order to affect the outcome of that particular result, which in some tragic cases would be excellent. Now that same information is available to us. Another example, democratization of some of the activities of our political leadership. Take, for example, the Panama Papers that really pointed to a lot of corrupt political activity in other countries, as well as the WikiLeaks. Whether you believe that to be a moral activity or not, it simply is information, it is truth. Whether that information was procured legally is a question apart from the truth that it contains. And the ability of individuals in more real time to consume, whether it is a printed word, a photograph, or a video of an event that is currently taking place or has taken place in the past, in my belief, clearly shows the decentralization and the democratization of information and knowledge. Clearly, to me, points that the internet is as important as the printing press in the global spread of knowledge.